Bikers surrounded his car. They spat on it, smashed the mirror, called him a nobody. And the man, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw a punch. He just watched. 5 minutes later, "We're so sorry." Their hands were dirty, their knees were on the pavement, and they were begging him for forgiveness because they had no idea who they were messing with. What would you have done if you saw this? Stand up or stay silent? Drop your answer in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. The rumble of a classic V8 echoed through the sleepy back roads of Sierra Ridge, a quiet town that hadn't seen action since the last biker rally 3 years ago. Dust rose behind the black '70 Chevelle SS as it pulled into the gravel lot outside Bean House, the only place in town that made a cappuccino without using powdered milk. The driver parked without hurry. Worn tires hissed to a stop, and the engine faded to a deep silence. The man who stepped out wore no flashy jacket or chrome accessories. Just a well-worn leather coat, dark jeans, and a faded baseball cap pulled low. A few strands of graying black hair curled at the nape of his neck. He shut the car door gently and walked into the cafe like any other weary traveler. Inside, he waited his turn, ordered his coffee black, and nodded politely at the cashier. No name, no chit-chat, just a nod. When he turned to find a table, he noticed them. 5 men outside. Bikers, young, loud, dressed like rebels, but moved like punks. They clustered near his car, one of them lighting a cigarette, while another pointed at the Chevelle. One had an iron-on patch stitched onto his vest. Ghost Wolf MC, a name that used to mean something. The man with the coffee watched from the window but didn't react. He stirred his drink once, maybe twice, then took a sip. His hand didn't even tremble. Outside, laughter broke out. When he stepped back onto the lot, the morning sun had shifted. The temperature had risen, but so had the tension. The leader of the group, a tall, muscled man with neck tattoos and mirrored sunglasses, stepped forward. His name was Kyle, though he didn't offer it. "You the guy with this piece of scrap?" Kyle said, tapping the hood of the Chevelle with the back of his ringed knuckle. The man gave a small nod. "Kyle Singer. See, we got rules around here, old man. This is Ghost Wolf territory. You park here, you pay the toll." The man didn't blink. "I'm just here for coffee." Kyle leaned in close enough to smell like chewing tobacco and cheap beer. "Then pay the toll and ride out." A silence fell between them. For a moment, it seemed like maybe that was all there'd be. But then another biker, a wiry, twitchy kid with more leather than sense, spit on the front tire. "Oops," he said. "Guess the old beast's leaking." The man looked down at the spit, then back up. Still no expression, just a quiet inhale through the nose. Kyle chuckled. "What? Too old to fight back or just too smart to try?" The man spoke for the first time since stepping outside. "Don't do this." That was it. Just 3 words. Calm even. But something in the tone made one of the bikers flinch. Kyle didn't. He stepped to the side and slammed his boot into the driver's side mirror. Glass exploded like brittle ice. The man didn't move. Another biker walked around to the rear and kicked the tail light. Plastic cracked. Dust flew. "You really going to just stand there?" Kyle barked. "You don't talk. You don't fight. Hell, you don't even flinch." The man met his eyes. "I asked you not to." Kyle laughed again. "Short. Cruel. What are you going to do?" "Grandpa, write me a poem." A few townsfolk across the street were watching now, some peeking from inside the cafe. A middle-aged waitress opened the back door and froze at the scene. One old man in particular, sitting on the cafe porch with his cane, watched the whole thing without blinking. His eyes locked on the biker patches. Something in his face twitched. Not fear, recognition. The man with the coffee said nothing more, just turned slowly and leaned against a nearby light post. His posture relaxed, even casual. Kyle spat on the ground. Pathetic. As they turned back to vandalize the car again, no one noticed the old man on the porch pull out his flip phone. No one heard him mutter just 3 words. His hair. It's starting. Kyle wasn't done. The more the stranger stayed quiet, the more it pissed him off. Silence wasn't strength to Kyle. It was weakness. And weakness in his world had to be punished. The Chevelle gleamed under the morning sun, even with a cracked mirror and a shattered tail light. Its paint was deep obsidian black, waxed by hand. It wasn't just a car. It was a memory. But to Kyle and his crew, it was just another prop in their performance. He stepped forward and pulled a chain from his belt. A thick rusted tow chain heavy enough to tow a truck or wreck one. "You're not going to do anything." Kyle growled. whipping the chain once like a serpent. Then I guess we'll teach you what happens when you walk into our street and act like you're better than us. The man said nothing, just stood by the light post, coffee still in hand, eyes distant but clay. Another biker, this one with a busted eyebrow ring and steel-toe boots, grinned and stumped hard into the side panel. A deep dent caved in the door, the metal groaning in protest. The cafe owner poked her head out the door, horrified. "Hey, stop it. That's vandalism." Kyle turned to her. "Step back inside. This here's a family matter." She froze, unsure. A few other customers gathered behind the glass windows, phones raised, recording, but no one stepped in. Not yet. With a yell, Kyle swung the chain. It struck the hood, leaving a jagged scar down the front. The clang rang out like a funeral bell. Still, the man didn't move. Kyle was breathing heavy now, half from adrenaline, half from disbelief. "You're still standing there." He spat. "What's wrong with you? You think this is some kind of movie?" The man lowered his coffee. His voice came low and steady. "I told you not to do this." Kyle's lip curled. "Oh what?" The man didn't answer, just stared. And for the first time, something in Kyle's chest shifted. Not fear, but unease. A crack in the performance. "I said, oh what?" Kyle shouted again, louder this time, as if volume could drown uncertainty. The man turned his head toward the horizon. Somewhere in the far distance, a low rumble echoed. Not loud enough to cause alarm, but deep enough to be noticed. The old man on the porch, the one with the cane, slowly rose to his feet. His voice was gravel. "Boy, you and your friends just pissed on a grave you don't even know you're standing on." Kyle blinked. "What the hell are you talking about?" The old man didn't answer. He just stepped down onto the sidewalk and lit a cigarette with fingers that shook. Not from fear, but from old adrenaline reawakening. The Chvel stood behind them, wounded but still proud. And the man, the one they still didn't recognize, just looked up at the morning sun and whispered, not to anyone in particular. Ghost Wolf never stood for cowards. Then he closed his eyes and waited. The chain hit the car again. Another dent, another laugh. But inside Darla's Bean House, the mood had changed. It was no longer entertainment for the coffee shop crowd. It was turning into something else. Uneasy stares, murmurs. No one knew who the quiet man was, but it was becoming painfully clear he wasn't just some drifter. The old man with the cane, his name was Rudy Mercer, stepped closer to the window, eyes narrowed. A former mechanic, Rudy had lived through the golden age of outlaw bikers and railroad honor. He hadn't seen the real Ghost Wolf emblem in over 2 decades. But the one those punks wore, it was wrong. Too clean, too symmetrical, no burn marks, no history. Fake-ass patches, he muttered. A barista next to him, maybe 21 at most, glanced over. "You know them." "No," Rudy said. "But I know what they think they are." Outside, Kyle shoved his way past the Chvel and spat at the ground again. Someone should torch this thing. Or maybe we'd drag it down Main Street so everyone gets the message. A biker behind him laughed too loudly. "Yeah, strip it and leave the shell in the river." But the jokes were getting thinner now. Even his own crew was starting to look unsure. The man hadn't moved, hadn't flinched, hadn't even raised his voice. People were watching. Some were recording, but nobody moved to stop it. Not yet. Then a soft voice behind the counter asked, "Is that really a Ghost Wolf patch?" Rudy turned. The voice belonged to Darla herself, hands still drying from the morning dishes. Rudy nodded slowly. "They think it is." Darla frowned. "I thought that club dissolved years ago after that fire down south." "They didn't dissolve," Rudy said, his eyes never leaving the man leaning against the post. "They disappeared." "Big difference." Another voice chimed in. "Liam, the sheriff's son, home from college. Weren't they the ones who stopped that cartel run through Utah? The ones who used to escort convoys of medical aid?" Rudy nodded again. "The real Ghost Wolf never cared about turf or power. They wore black because they buried too many friends. They rode for honor, not vanity." Darla whispered. "Then who is he?" Rudy finally looked away from the glass and straight into her eyes. "I don't know his name, but the way he's standing, that's the posture of someone who built something, not borrowed it, not wear it for show. Build it." Outside, Kyle slammed a fist on the hood one last time. "You deaf old man." The stranger didn't reply. He simply turned his head toward the horizon again. That low rumble, still distant but louder than before, was coming closer. Rudy stepped out onto the porch, cigarette still burning in his fingers. "Time to see if ghosts really ride again," he murmured. And inside the cafe, everyone stopped talking because deep down they already knew the answer. Kyle was running out of ways to get a reaction. He'd spat. He'd cursed. He'd kicked in a taillight and shattered a mirror. The hood of the Chevelle bore a fresh set of chain marks like claw wounds from a wild animal. His boys had laughed at first, hyping him up, but now their energy was thinning, confused by the man's refusal to react. Still leaning against the light post, the stranger hadn't taken a single step forward, just stood there with one hand around his now empty coffee cup, eyes shadowed beneath the curve of his hat. "You think you're better than us?" Kyle barked. "What? You one of those silent type wannabe monks or something? What kind of man just stands there and lets his car get wrecked?" A few townsfolk murmured from across the street. No one dared intervene, but phones were still up recording, capturing the way a man could lose everything and still not raise his voice. Keanu's voice came low and steady. "You boys don't know what you're wearing." The sentence dropped like a stone in water. Kyle cocked his head. "The hell does that mean?" "The patch," the man said, finally pushing off the post. "You wear it like it gives you power, like it's yours. But it wasn't made for punks who bark and hide behind groups." Kyle laughed and looked back at his crew. "Hear that? Old man wants to give a history lesson." The man stepped closer now. Slow, measured steps that made even the twitchiest of the bikers shift their weight uneasily. He stood beside his ruined car and looked down at the dented metal like someone staring at an injured animal. "It's not about the patch," he continued. "It's about what it stood for. We didn't ride to be feared. We rode to protect the ones no one else would." Kyle snarled. "You talk like you were part of it." No answer. Only a look. And for the first time, Kyle flinched. He masked it quickly, stepping forward and jabbing a finger at the man's chest. "I don't give a damn who you think you are. You're just some washed-up relic who wandered too far from the museum." That's when he did it. With a quick snap, Kyle reached over and ripped the chain from around the man's neck, expecting maybe a locket or a dog tag. What fell into his hand wasn't flashy. It was a weathered silver medallion engraved with a faded wolf emblem. The original crest of the Ghost Wolf MC scratched and worn from decades of road dust and rain. Kyle stayed at it for half a second too long. The man didn't move. He simply said, "That's not yours." And just then, the rumble grew louder. Much louder. From the far end of the street, dozens of headlights pierced the morning haze. Row after row of bikes, old engines, veteran riders, no chrome, no patches, just black, just wolves. The street trembled before the engines even came into view. It started as a low growl, steady, deep, not the erratic revving of show-off machines. These were tuned engines ridden by men who didn't need noise to prove presence. The townspeople turned toward the sound instinctively. Then the first bike appeared. Then another. Then a dozen more. Each one black. No chrome. No skulls. No flames. Only leather, steel, and silence. They rode 2x2 down Main Street like shadows reclaiming forgotten ground, weathered faces beneath old helmets, battle-card jackets that didn't need logos to speak their history. And on one of the bikes, mounted like a flag, was the original Ghost Wolf patch, aged, stitched, and real. Kyle stepped back. Who the hell are they?" he snapped, turning to his crew, whose bravado had already begun to crack. Rudy Mosa limped down from the cafe steps, flipping his cigarette to the curb. "Those are the men whose names you've been dragging through dirt for years," he said. "And they don't like funerals unless it's someone they respected." The lead rider pulled up slowly, dismounted. Tall, thick frame, gray beard down to his chest. His jacket bore no title, no rank, just the scars of decades lived on two wheels. He looked straight at Keanu. "You called?" Keanu nodded once, nothing more. The rider turned to Kyle and his crew. "You boys have been playing club," he growled, voice like rusted gravel. "Putting on patches you didn't own, posting pictures, starting fights, using our name to get free drinks and bully towns like this." Kyle tried to straighten his spine. "Who the hell are you to tell us?" "Shut it," the rider snapped. His tone wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. "Do you know what that patch means?" he continued, stepping forward, boots heavy on the asphalt. "It means burying brothers. It means bleeding for someone who isn't you. It means riding into places no one else would go just to pull someone out." One of the younger bikers, barely 20, let his patch jacket slip from his shoulders. No one stopped him. Kyle opened his mouth again, but the man cut him off with a jab of his finger. "You wrecked his car," he said. Kyle blinked. "His?" The writer tilted his head toward Keanu, still standing quietly by the post. "You don't even know whose name you were pretending to wear." And then he said it. "That's him. That's the founder." Kyle's breath caught. A ripple of disbelief swept through his gang. "No," he began, but Rudy nodded, arms crossed. "Son, you just tried to humiliate the man who built the name you stole." Another bike shut off. Another rider stepped forward. We followed him through fire, through war, through silence. The street had gone still. And Kyle, he finally looked at the man whose car he'd destroyed and realized he'd just spat on the grave of a legend. The silence after the truth hit was deafening. Kyle's lips parted, but nothing came out. His chest rose and fell in tight, uneven gasps around him. The rest of his crew shrank. No more swagger, no more jeering, only darting eyes and twitching fingers. Across from them, the real ghost Wolf MC riders stood still like statues cut from old road and fire. Some crossed their arms. Others leaned slightly forward, waiting for a word, a nod, anything. But the man who had the right to order retribution said nothing. Keanu stood calmly by his broken Chevelle, one hand resting gently on its dented frame. His expression hadn't changed since the first insult was thrown. That quiet stare had endured through every kick, every spit, every broken piece of glass. It was that silence, unchanging, unshakable, that undid Kyle more than any punch ever could. The great bearded rider, Bear, the original vice president, stepped toward him. "You wore the patch," Bear growled. "You dishing the name. Now you make it right." Kyle laughed once, short and hollow. "Make it right. You want me to buy him a new mirror?" Bear stepped closer. "No, you're going to clean every scar you left." Another rider tossed a grimy sponge and a bucket of water at Kyle's feet. "Start with the hood." Kyle didn't move. Then came the voice from behind him. "Rudy's. You got two choices, son. Make it right or try to outrun what's coming." Phones were still recording. The town was watching. Whatever Kyle did now would live forever. He knelt. His knees hit the pavement with a sickening slap. Gravel dug into denim. Slowly, shakily, he dipped the sponge into the water and dragged it across the Chevelle's hood. The crowd was silent. One by one, the other fake bikers followed. Some crying, some pale, some barely breathing. They scrubbed the wheels, the doors, the mirror shards. They whispered apologies like children caught stealing from a church. When they were done, Bear walked up to Kyle again. He reached out, grabbed the patch on Kyle's jacket, and ripped it clean off. "This was never yours," he said, then tossed it to the ground like trash. Bear turned to Keanu. "You want to say something?" Keanu looked at Kyle, then the others, then the town. "Not today." That was all. He climbed into his car, door creaking. The engine rumbled to life, battered, but loyal. He didn't look back as he pulled away. The wolves cleared a path, their bikes parting like a guard of honor. The man was gone. But the lesson, it would echo in that town forever. By the time the rumble of Keanu's engine faded down the road, no one spoke. Kyle still knelt beside the Chevelle's tire marks, his jeans stained and wet, fingers trembling with rage. But not at Keanu, at himself. The ghost wolf. MC riders didn't say a word either. They simply mounted their bikes in silence, one by one. No celebration, no threat, just a quiet reclaiming of something sacred. Rudy sat back down on the porch steps, letting his cane lean against the rail. He lit a fresh cigarette with tired hands and looked out across the street. Darla came out beside him, arms crossed. "He could have humiliated them," she said. "Could have called the cops, pressed charges, torn their names apart." Rudy nodded. "But he didn't." "Why?" He exhaled smoke toward the horizon. "Because that's not what real power looks like." She glanced toward the bucket of filthy water left behind. "They'll never forget him." "They better not," Rudy muttered. Some men shout to be heard. Others just are. Down the street, a boy no older than 10 stood gripping his father's hand, eyes wide. "Was that man a superhero or something?" he whispered. His father knelt beside him, shaking his head. "No, son. He's just a man." But that's what makes it even better. And across the town, phones buzz with a single video now going viral, of a silent man being insulted, of a car destroyed, of a truth revealed too late. People weren't cheering for violence. They were watching something rarer. Self-restraint in the face of cruelty. Dignity when no one was giving it to you. Justice without revenge. Because in the end, Keanu Reeves didn't need to hit back. The truth did it for him. And now, if you believe respect should never depend on appearances, status, or silence, hit like, share this story, and tell us where in the world are you watching from. Because stories like this, they deserve to be heard everywhere.